Okay, I believe we are all the way live. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I am your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass. Live in living color here with you on YouTube. How we doing on this voluptuous Friday? It is beautiful outside. The birds are singing. The sun is shining. Everybody's smiling except people that have to be stuck in the house through all this bullshit, which is everybody, unfortunately. But it is what it is. That's why I'm here. That's why the graveyard is provided to thee. And I'm gonna be talking all things horror like usual. So I was pondering show ideas for a while, and like I have this big list of show ideas that like I've want to do in the future, have done in the past, and this particular show I definitely wanted to discuss something that I feel like is very not talked about in the horror community. And Aiden Vabra is in the Heezy. What's up? How you doing, good brother? Hope all is well. But yeah, I've been wanting to do a show for a while, and basically the show is the 1960s in horror. And because the year is 2020 and 60 years ago 1960 began, I figured we'd do a 60 years and 1960s of horror celebration on the show where I discuss my top 10 horror movies of the 1960s. I thought that'd be a fun show topic, something I haven't done. And honest to God, I figured, oh, someone had to have done a top 10 video of the 1960s in horror, other than one channel, Watch Mojo, which, they have enough freaking subscribers and whatnot. That is the only channel I could find that did a top 10 video talking about their favorite 60s horror films. And that just blows my mind. For some reason, this decade is really kind of overlooked, and I can't really see why. Like, okay, the 30s is the Universal Monsters, whereas the 40s, you have a lot of like paranormal movies like The Uninvited, and you know, you have some good stuff. Then the 50s, you get more towards the sci fi horror aspects like big giant bugs and them, and there are some decent 50s horror films, but generally the genre was leaning more towards science fiction than it was leaning towards horror. So I'm kind of meh on that. I don't really, the 50s is definitely one of my least favorite decades in the history of horror. Like I can think of the few movies that I like from that decade, but overall the 50s, not the biggest 50s horror guy. However, when you get to the 60s, which I mean, it's a shame that a lot of people don't really talk about this decade in horror. I mean, when they are good, they are great in the 1960s. And my top 10, I actually did some research and looked this up. All 10 of them have at least a 7 on IMDb. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane. That goes to show you how great of quality these movies are. And like the highest, I think, is like an 8.5. So, I mean, all of these movies seems like they're unanimously loved and praised and liked. So I thought that would be cool. I have a bunch of honorable mentions we'll get to in a little bit. And I don't know, I just wanted to say, as a whole, I think the 60s is super underrated. I wish more people got into these 60s horror films. And who knows, maybe this video will help these movies get more love and get more appreciation because, I mean, the movies, I mean, okay, there are definitely two or three on this list that everyone talks about, everybody loves, everybody gives the reputation that they deserve. But I think when you look at my top two choices, the choice that comes in at number 10, number 9, hell, even number 6, which I personally had never seen it before I did this prep. I think a lot of these movies, uh, they're fantastic and they're super underrated. They don't really get the love that they deserve. So I'm going to try to give them all the love in the world today on the show, and I'm going to go through my top 10. But before I do that, I just wanted to say I got this awesome Blu-ray double feature in the mail the other day from my good buddy. I won this at a horror auction that Dead Pit did. And I want to say shout out to my buddy Garrett who sent me this. This is awesome. This is an out of print double feature of The House That Vanished and The Eerie Midnight Horror Show, aka The Sexorcist. That's actually the real title of the movie. It's like a really bad, sleazy Exorcist ripoff from Italy, I believe. So I can't wait to watch this. This is definitely like the next horror movie I will watch, because I am not kidding you when I say that this week on the show, I have never watched more movies to prepare for a show. Like, I wanted to try to cover every fucking thing that came out in the 1960s worth a damn. And for the most part, I did. For the most part, I rewatched most of these 60s horror films that are notable or, popular, at least in some vein. So I definitely did really, really careful research and show prep, and I decided on these 10 as my favorite. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. But yeah, I'm not a big 1950, because it's more, the problem with it is it's way more sci-fi than horror. That's my problem with it. Like, okay, giant bug attacking the city. I get that there's horror elements, but that's sci-fi. That's, even the title, them with the exclamation point. That's sci-fi. It is. I know people don't want to hear that stuff, but it is what it is. And before I get into this list, because people, I know certain people that love Hammer horror films, and I will not lie. I don't have a Hammer horror film on my top 10. I don't even have a Hammer horror film on my honorable mentions. I'm not a big Hammer guy. I don't know. I never really truly got into Hammer horror. And I know people are going to go, how do you not like Hammer horror? And are you a true horror fan even? And I'm just like, yeah, I am. It's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a big Hammer horror guy. Never was. Honestly, never will be. I respect, obviously, Christopher Lee. I respect all these great actors that were in these movies. And I don't know, I just, for some reason, they just never appealed to me that much. And I've given them numerous tries. I'm just kind of meh on the whole Hammer horror. So if you don't see any Hammer horror on this list, which you're not gonna, don't be mad. And also, if you don't agree with a spot, if you don't agree with a movie, if I left out a movie that I didn't mention honorably, be sure to let me know, and just please be kind. If you don't agree with my list, make your own list. That's the fun of this. And I wish someone would make their own list, because other than Watch Mojo, there's not one other top 10 1960s horror movies on YouTube that I could find. So I thought that was very alarming. So without further ado, let's dive right into the top 10. I'm going to do 10 to 2, give honorable mentions before 1, and then we're going to do number 1. We'll do it Watch Mojo style. All right. So coming in at number 10 from 1961, directed by Jack Hill, it is The Innocents. And I'm sorry, not Jack Hill, Jack Clayton, excuse me. Yeah, we're off to a raucous start. Starring Deborah Kerr, Peter Wingard, Meg Jenkins, Michael Redgrave, and Martin Stevens. I freaking love this movie. This is a really good one. I give a little plot synopsis here. It's not much. It's just a sentence. A young governess for 2 children becomes convinced that the house and grounds are haunted. So basically, this woman uh, takes over this new estate, right? And she's taking care of these kids, and she's told that they're the 2 greatest kids in the world. And slowly but surely, she starts to realize maybe, just maybe, they're not 2 of the greatest kids in the world, and they both may be up to no good. And what I love about this movie is it's just the paranoia that our main character feels, and the tension that and eerie dread you have throughout the entire film. You really do believe, along with her, that the house may exactly be haunted. And you learn this backstory of long, long ago. There was this couple who were together, and they died in a tragic way, and maybe they've transferred their souls into the children. And they play with that concept. They keep kind of throwing curveballs at you, so you can keep kind of guessing where this movie's going to go. And I, honest to God, thought for sure I knew where it was going, and every time I thought so, I was hit with a curveball. So I think this is a really, really cool flick. I just, the look of it, the overall scope of it, really good. It has that old school classic haunted house feel. And I know a lot of people that they probably won't like this, from 1963, The Haunting. That movie's not on here. I actually like this movie a lot more than The Haunting. I think this is the movie that The Haunting wanted to be. And of course, this movie was not technically remade, but kind of ripped off with The Turning that came out this year, actually, 2020 in February. And it was pretty much the same thing. This woman takes care of these 2 kids, and the kids just go ape shit, and they're kind of haunted and creepy and stuff. But dare I say that I like that this film doesn't really end up going that route. Spoilers here. This movie kind of ends towards the line where she's so convinced that they are being possessed and the house is haunted that she ends up scaring the kids to death and believing this too. She convinces them that they're possessed. She convinces them that the house is haunted. And in essence, the kid Miles, the boy, he actually collapses and dies in her arms as the film comes to an end. I just remember being like, holy shit, like that is not where I thought this was going. I thought there might be an exorcism. I thought, there might be a get out of this, an exorcism. But they don't go that route. They kind of just go the route of this bitch was so paranoid that she scared this poor kid to death. I love that. I think that's very original. Apparently, that wasn't the original ending, and the director hired a different writer to switch the ending because originally it was going to be, oh, this is, you are haunted ending. But I loved that the title really does come into play, the innocence. These kids were innocent, but it was this woman's fear of possession, of haunting, of all of these things that ultimately lead her to accidentally kill one of the children. And I thought that was really, really smart. I thought that was a different theme to tackle. And dare I say, a theme that hasn't really been tackled much since. I mean, I can't really think of too many where the one person was so convinced and then there was nothing going on. And I like that. I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of a she scared herself out of it. I think that's pretty cool. A little bit different, a little bit out of the box, but I thought it was executed really well by the director Jack Clayton. And I don't know, I really, really love this movie. I thought it was awesome. I would give The Innocents out of 10. I'll probably come in at a solid 8. I really liked The Innocents. I think that's a really cool, underrated one that nobody really talks about. People usually give The Haunting its due, but nobody really gives The Innocents. But I like The Innocents way better. So that is number 10. That is The Innocents. I really, really dig that film. Okay, coming in at number 9. It is from the year 1960. It is from one of my favorite directors of all time, Sir Mario Bava. It is Black Sunday. Yes, I love me some Black Sunday. Little Barbara Steele, John Richardson, Andrea Chichichi. I don't even know how to say her damn name, but it's fun to try. Basically the plot synopsis of this one. Oh, sorry, my phone is on. See, I am reading the list off my phone. So anybody that messages me, and it's now silenced. A vengeful witch and her fiendish servant return from the grave and begin a bloody campaign to possess the body of the witch's beautiful look-alike descendant, with only the girl's brother and a handsome doctor standing in their way. Yes, Black Sunday, man. I freaking adore Black Sunday. This is classic old school gothic Bava. And I won't lie, this is not the first and last Bava film on the list. I absolutely adore Mario Bava, and you will see one of his other movies on the top 10 list. This movie, I think it's one of my favorite horror movie openings. You have Barbara Steele, and she's this witch and slash vampire. They do mention she's kind of like a vampire. She's been sucking blood out of people, which obviously, if anyone's gonna suck blood out of you, you want it to be Barbara Steele. She's like up against this stake, and they say, we're gonna put the mask of Satan on this bitch. And I'm like, what? They bring out this mask with like sharp edges on the inside, kind of like, if you ever seen, I don't know why this comes to my head, but Saw 2, when the Venus flytrap thing, not the that's the bear trap I'm thinking of, but yeah, it's the Venus flytrap where it crushes the guy's face, spikes the guy's face. This is just a mask like that, and they put it over her, and before they do, she says, I put a curse on thee that if you are ever to bleed upon my grave, I will come back and strike you down. They all kind of hawk at her. They all kind of laugh. They put the mask over her face, and this freaking guy takes a ginormous mallet and smashes it into her fucking face, and it just like crushes her. And you see all this gore pour out, and then the titles start. That's how you start off your fucking film. That's fucking insane. Like 3.5 minutes in, you have this bitch, cutting promos. I will come back from the grave if you bleed upon my grave, and I will strike you down. And the Mask of Satan, which actually is, I believe, the alternate title, or I don't remember which country. It might be America that uses the Mask of Satan title, which that works as a title too, because that's like an iconic image in this movie where she gets that fucking mask just smashed into her face. Really good stuff. Amazing, to be honest with you. And the rest of it is basically 200 years later, this guy that's part of the other guy's bloodline accidentally bleeds upon her grave, and she comes back. Her and her servant come back with a furious vengeance as they try to overtake certain people, take over their bodies, switch places, because obviously they're 200 years old. They want some new bodies. They want to be looking voluptuous again, like only Barbara Steele can. I gotta say, throughout the whole thing, you feel this awesome gothic atmosphere. I think Barbara Steele does a really good job. She doesn't play just one, but she plays two roles. She plays like a hero role and a villainous role. I think she does a really, really good job of balancing both of them. I think that this movie introduces a lot of themes that only gothic horror can really establish well. And I think of this too when the guy bleeds upon the grave. I almost think Clive Barker may have taken some of inspiration for that when it comes to Hellraiser, because in that film the Andrew Robinson character, he cuts his hand and it goes on the floor, and then that's what, gives brings Frank back to life. That little drop of blood. Well, there was a lot of blood in that movie, but in this movie, it's just a single drop of blood, and bam, she's back and better than ever. So that's another thing I've noticed about these 60s movies. A lot of these movies have gone on to inspire future filmmakers. Like, we'll get into one in a little bit that I think inspired Dario Argento. We'll get into ones that obviously created certain genres. And I think if for anything else, for nothing else, this is one of the most influential decades in the history of horror. I would say even more influential than the 70s, because the 70s really took all the pieces and ran with them, whereas this decade they're still putting the pieces in the right spots, but every now and again you see something that you're like, "Oh my god, so and so took that. Oh my god, so and so definitely got some inspiration from that." That's what I like about these movies. I think it's really cool to see where it was done first. And who knows, maybe it was done before them even. I don't know. Like, that's the fun of it. Like, you can kind of watch these things and go, "Oh man, that's the first time I've seen that." And someone will go, "Nope, 2 years earlier, so and so did this." Like, you never can see it all. I think that's the fun with doing these. But man, I enjoyed this marathon overall. Like, I've really had a good time. And Black Sunday was totally a highlight. I thought Barbara Steele was awesome. I thought the makeup effects on her was good. Like, after that, she has kind of indents on her face, like it looks like small piercings from where Satan's mask killed her. Thought that was really cool. I just loved the overall atmosphere, and I don't know. I thought this was a really good movie. I'll come in again at an 8 out of 10. I thought this was awesome, a lot of fun, gothic horror at its finest, and Bava kicking ass, taking names in the horror genre like Bava always did. So I really do appreciate Black Sunday. That's a really good one. Good buddy Aiden says he were going to check them both out. So good. See, I'm getting people to, at least somebody, to see these movies. I'm happy because, these movies really, I think most of them don't really get the love that they deserve. And I've also noticed that a lot of people other than Aiden, thank you, Aiden, you're my true fan here. This video, this post, whatever, it didn't really like interest a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people just hear 1960s and go, not interested. But I don't know, man. I had a blast doing this show, and I hope more people check this video out and check these movies out, especially. But that is what it is. Coming in at number 8, we move on to the maddest story ever told, aka Spider Baby. This one is written and directed by Jack Hill. I'm sorry, but there's too many Jacks, I guess, on the director's list. But this one stars the legendary Lon Chaney Jr. as the sort of caretaker to these children that live in this house. One of them is actually played by Sid Haig, and we all love Sid Haig, absolutely, as Captain Spaulding. He plays the Ralph character. Of course, you have Jill Banner, the late great Jill Banner, playing Virginia, aka Spider Baby. She does an excellent job in this film. And basically, this is like one of the most fun movies of the 1960s. Like, I fucking have a ball with this movie because I think, well, a lot of ways what you have is uh, not a changing of the guard, but almost an homage to the guard and an introduction to what the 70s would be. You have a guy like Lon Chaney Jr. who has established the genre since the early 40s with The Wolfman, and has gone on to make so many other Universal horror pictures. And, we all know and love Lon Chaney. Lon Chaney is like one of horror's most sacred, beloved character actors. Getting him for this film, I think, was the most important thing because he steals it. He truly does steal it. It is his performance that makes me love this movie because it's his sense of dread and his sense of knowing that shit is going to hit the fan throughout the whole film that really is entertaining. But on the other hand, you have Jack Hill, who would go on to be a blaxploitation slash exploitation filmmaker in the 70s. I believe Jack Hill made Coffee, a lot of Pam Grier films, and he's awesome. I love him. He's a big exploitation style filmmaker. But it's his kind of tackling of the old school classic black and white horror film. So in a lot of ways, you have the old school meeting what is going to become the new school, and they kind of just mix together to make this one perfect movie. I don't know how they do it, but man, I absolutely adore this movie. I think this is a lot of fun. Of course, you have Jill Banner as Spider Baby, who, if you get into her spider web, she takes these two knives and will stab the shit out of you. Like the opening scene in the film, there's this little mailman who kind of sticks his nose into the house and he wants to see what's going on in the house. And she throws a net on him and he's like, "Oh my God, help me." And she's like, "You are my spider web." Pulls out two knives and goes to town on him. You don't generally see that in the 1960s. In the 70s, sure. In the 80s, of course. Hell, even in most of the 90s, especially the latter half of the 90s, you saw more violence like that. But with this film, dare I say, other than maybe a Psycho, other than maybe certain films like that, you don't see a lot of slicing and dicing, but you do get that in this film, and I think it's really well done. There's a really fun dinner scene where basically I can explain a little bit of the plot of this if you haven't seen it. Uh, Jill Banner, freaking Sid Haig, and this other girl, they're all like these three kids, and they all have like some kind of crazy virus, and it makes them crazy. And Lon Chaney is the caretaker for them. And basically, one day, these people come and they claim that they own the house and they're going to buy the house and all this stuff. And the rest of the movie is Lon Chaney trying to convince the children not to murder these people. And there's a really fun dinner scene where they actually go full on meta and they're talking about horror films, which I loved. It's almost an homage. This is like way self-aware even before Scream was a concept, before Student Bodies was a concept, before Scary Movie was a concept, all these things. I think I love this scene because they're like, "Oh man, the old Universal horror pictures and the Wolfman, that scared me." And then Lon Chaney at the end of the table goes, "It is going to be a full moon tonight." I love that. I pop every single time at that. That's so freaking meta. Having the Wolfman say, "Well, there will be a full moon tonight." That's batshit. I love that. I think that is so much damn fun. Jill Banner is so good in her performance too, man. Like she is so devilish, but at the same time, she's so sexy. And like it feels wrong because she is just so fucking crazy that you're like, oh my God, like this is fucked up, man. And Sid Haig plays Ralph, who's the crazy brother, and he's not all there. He doesn't really say much, which I always wish that Sid Haig had said more in this movie. I will say that. But man, I do enjoy Sid Haig running around the house with her, and I don't know. I think this movie just checks off all the boxes for me. It's the perfect meeting of a 60s, you know, gothic horror film with the old Universal touch there, meeting a like precursor to an exploitation film, and the two coming together. And I think they just work as a perfect cohesive unit. And I just have a ball with this movie. I think Spider Baby is a masterpiece. I'm gonna come in at a 9 out of 10 for Spider Baby. I highly, highly recommend this one, aka the maddest story ever told. I believe it's public domain. I think you can watch this movie wherever for free, and I highly recommend you do because it has everything. It has that sex appeal, it has that crazy ass violence. It has great acting from Lon Chaney, Sid Haig, and of course the late great Jill Banner, who I absolutely adore. I think she does a great job in this film. And I don't know, man. I'm one of those people that I enjoy these types of films. So Spider Baby, I'm gonna put Spider Baby over, man. That is the number 8 film, and I'm gonna give it a solid 9 out of 10. I really love that one. Play Ridley School Vargas. Holy crap, I haven't seen your name in forever. I hope all is well, my man. Hope you're staying safe during the corona. We live in crazy times, brother. Aiden wants to check out Spider Baby too. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Spider Baby is definitely a fucking classic. I love me some Spider Baby. But in turn, we turn to a film that is the complete opposite of Spider Baby in the number 7 spot here. We have from 1965, this is Roman Polanski's Repulsion. To say this film repulsed me would be the understatement of the year. I honestly, I had never seen this before I did this marathon, and I was just like, I held off on it. I had seen Rosemary's Baby. I had a feeling that I thought I knew what this was going to be. I thought it was going to be style over substance, and in a lot of ways, this film is style over substance. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and I will right off the bat say that I don't know if I like this film as much as I respect it. If that makes any sense, and you'd probably ask, why is it number 7 on the list? I feel like it just needs to be there, kind of thing. It basically stars this young, beautiful French woman. I do want to get her name here. I will get her name here. Just give me one segundo because I want to get her name right. She was Catherine Deneuve, I believe that's how you say it. It's obviously a French name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but uh, she does a great job as the lead in this film. She's basically this woman. She lives with her sister in this apartment, and you follow her for the first about 20, 30 minutes. You follow her everyday life. She works at this makeup parlor. She's kind of disgusted by overtly, you know, pushing for men. She doesn't like men coming on to women too strongly. Like she there's a scene where she's just sitting minding her own business on a park bench, and this guy kind of comes over and he's like, "Hey baby, how you doing?" and like starts hitting on her, and it makes her feel the utmost uncomfortable. And you could see how she is just literally disgusted, repulsed, and turned off by men that come over the top and try to hit on her. And there's even scenes where this guy forcibly kisses her and she goes home and brushes her teeth for like 5 minutes. Like she can't handle it. She does it. She's totally turned off by it. She finds men repulsing. Sooner or later, her sister decides to leave for a couple weeks with her boy toy, and the rest of the film is our protagonist slowly going mad in the apartment, and certain people visit. She thinks she hears certain footsteps. She opens and closes the door sometimes, and you may or may not see someone standing behind her in a reflection of a mirror. There are scenes where she's trying to walk down the hallway and these hands kind of grab out of the walls. It's really well done. It is really well directed by Roman Polanski. Dare I say, I think it's better directed than Rosemary's Baby. And that's saying a lot because I like Rosemary's Baby better than this film. Where I think this movie hits me the most strong is that it repulsed me too. Like by the end of it, I was kind of depressed. I was like, damn, this is fucking a lot to take in. And that's why I don't know. I would say of all these 10 movies on this top 10 list, I don't know how much I can recommend this one rather than say I respect it. And I really think it does its job. Because on one way you could easily say, I don't like it. It was fucking disgusting. It made no sense. That's a lot of people that when people don't like something, they automatically say that sentence. It made no sense. This movie makes perfect sense. I'm not one of those people I didn't get it. I got it. I just felt it did its job so well that it turned me off to it. I was like, damn, I don't want to watch this. This is fucking horrifying, man. Like the feeling that this woman has. And it's funny because the woman is gorgeous. She is really good to look at. But it's her expressions and her disgust and angst that makes me as a viewer disgusted in the world around her. And I think that this movie today, even more so than a Rosemary's Baby, is way more relevant today than it even would be back in the day. I definitely liked it a lot. I think it's definitely better directed than Rosemary's Baby. But as a whole, I don't know. I like Rosemary's Baby better, but I think that this movie has its moments where I'm just like, wow. I can't recommend this one. I really can't. I have to say it's very repulsing. But if you want to watch a repulsing film done to perfection, a beautiful style, not too much substance. Again, there's not too much dialogue in this movie. It's much more of a style over substance film. So you have to know what you're getting yourself into. I did, luckily. I thought it was a great film. I just don't know if I like this film as much as I respect it. So that is Polanski's Repulsion, and I really dig it. I think, in all honesty, I would give it about a 7 out of 10 for a personal rating. But I will say that the movie is probably a 9 out of 10 overall because it really does do its job. I think it's really well done. I'm safe. Oh, dude, that's good to hear. I'm safe too, man. It's a shame that it's such beautiful weather out today and I can't do nothing. But that's why the graveyard's here, brother. You know it. Um, better direct. Yeah, definitely. I think it's better directed. I think the scare sequences are very well done, and I think this film benefits from being black and white as opposed to the color aspect because when we get to the number one pick, that film was originally going to be in color, and one of the leads said, "There's no way you're making this film in color. I'm not doing that bullshit." So, oh, dude, glad to hear you're safe too. Everybody, I hope everybody's safe. Um, that is Polanski's Repulsion. And now coming in at number 6, this is again another Bava film. I know, I love me some Mario Bava, but that is the way it goes because he is the freaking man, and so is his son Lamberto Bava. Uh, this is Blood and Black Lace from 1964. I absolutely adore this movie. I freaking think that this movie was definitely the one that surprised me the most out of all the movies I watched and show prep for this because this was another first time watch for me. Blood and Black Lace is if Suspiria and Scream met and had a baby. That's Blood and Black Lace. And I freaking adore this movie. It basically tells the story of these women, and one by one, they're getting picked off by this masked killer. And the whole thing is shot like Suspiria would go on to be shot. So, in essence, I think Dario Argento sees this film and goes, I'm going to go make Suspiria. Like it's very similar as with a color palette, with direction, art style, feel, atmosphere, score, all that stuff feels very much Argento before Argento even started making films. I think that's so cool. The opening shot of this movie is just these people sitting in a room in similar vein to Clockwork Orange, which again, Stanley Kubrick may have taken some inspiration from this when he made Clockwork Orange. There are people, standing in the frame, and then to the right, it has this beautiful red wall, and then this woman in a red dress kind of looking to the side. It's very artsy, the opening of this film, but I love it. I think it's so, so, so well executed. And the entire film, how well it is micromanaged and how well that Baba sets up the shots. I think he just nails this movie, man. I adore the cinematography in this movie because a lot of people forget that Baba was a cinematographer before a director. And he does the cinematography in this film, and man, it might be his best work for a cinematography standpoint. And the film looks fantastic in sparkling HD. I highly recommend you watch HD. Like this is not one that you rent on an old school VHS or buy on VHS. Like this is one you want the Blu-ray of. Like the HD version of this looks incredible. I just love it. Again, you have characters getting picked off one by one. You have this one lady who he's trying to get the bag from her, and he takes her hand and puts it on this like hot lamp and burns her fucking hand and shit. There's some pretty violent ass kills in this movie. I don't want to spoil them all, but a lot of people probably asking, how do you get Scream out of this, Grande? This is 1964. Where do you get Scream? Spoilers here. So I do warn you all. The finale of this is so Scream. It's so much like a Scream film. Basically, throughout the whole film, we think that this big burlesque man is doing the killings because we see him in a mask. He's a big dude killing all these women. But towards the end, we learn there is not just one killer, there are two. And it is not two men like I thought. It was a man and a woman that were in love. And I won't tell you who it is exactly. So maybe this could come as a bigger surprise because I am spoiling a little bit here. But they are lovers. And each one, after they commit a murder, is providing an alibi for themselves. So if he goes off to do the killing, the woman is making sure she's in a crowd full of people. So, okay, we can check her off. And then, bam, when she's doing the killings, bam, he's in a big crowd of people. So they each kind of keep backing the other up. and, providing alibis until there's one final kill that she has to make in order to prove that he's innocent. And the two have an argument. He says, listen, you have to kill one more. I'm sorry. Like, I didn't want it to get this far, but you have to do this. And you get the sense that maybe he's going to double cross her. But what I love is that she gets the feeling too. So she does kill the person she has to kill, but she makes it look like a suicide. And then he plots to kill her, and then she kind of just stumbles in the room half dead, and she's like, what's the matter? You thought I'd be dead? You look very surprised to see me alive. I love, love, love the final. It's almost like Billy and Stu going at it. If Billy or Stu, one of them was a chick, and they're just going off on each other. He's like, "Oh, well, I didn't mean for this to happen. You know me. Come on," like joking around. And she's like, "You just threw me off a balcony. You fucking meant to kill me. Come on." Like, I love that stuff, man. The dialogue back and forth is just so much fun, and the two of them just had this great dialogue back and forth, and I just love that. I love adding that Scream kind of twist where it's not one but two killers. It's not just two men. It's a man and a woman that were in love, and one wants to double cross the other, but because the woman still loves him, she can't let that happen. She refuses to believe it, but she knows in the back of her head that's true. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of complex story arc, especially for a Bava film. But man, I just adore this one, man. I have a great time with Blood and Black Lace. I think, again, the color palette, the cinematography, off the charts, the kills. I mean, this is really the film that I think inspired Dario Argento to go on and be Dario Argento. I really see most of Argento's style in a film like this. And apparently, I don't know if this is true or not. No one's ever really been able to confirm, but I believe Mario Bava, the last film he ever worked on was Argento's Inferno. He came in and directed second unit for a little while, and then he apparently was directing the entire film at one point. And it makes sense because Inferno is a gorgeous looking film. Of course, those underwater sequences of the woman looking for the key. Of course, the finale with "We are death" and the woman walking through with the skeleton costume. I mean, that's a classic fucking film, and I have a good feeling that Bava was definitely involved. And I like that Argento, I don't know if it was Argento's call or not, but I think Argento said, "Hey man, you're the master. I want you to come in and help me out with this last thing." And like, it's sad that Bava, that was his last film, but I think it's nice that Argento kind of not even was passed the torch, but was thankful that he was passed the torch, if that makes any sense. I adore Mario Bava as a filmmaker, and this is probably my favorite Mario Bava film. Yes, even more than Bay of Blood. I said it. I love Bay of Blood, but this is more fun. And I think it's honestly a lot better to watch. Like, it's a more of a spectacle to watch. It has everything going for it. I love Blood and Black Lace. I'm gonna come in at the first 10 out of 10 on this top 10 list. That means the rest of these are all 10 out of 10s, which is a lot of fun. But I love me some Blood and Black Lace. Into the top 5. Holy oh Jesus, man. We are getting there. The top 5 horror films of the 1960s. Are you guys ready? Are you stoked? I'm stoked. Coming at number 5, again, a Polanski film. I know you guys are probably like, man, this is the Polanski Baba show. So was the 60s in horror, baby. That's just how it plays out. It is Rosemary's Baby from 1968, starring Mia Farrow, starring Ruth Gordon, John Cassavetes. I mean, this is one of the all-time great horror films, and this is definitely one of the horror films from the 60s that does get its due. In fact, this one and the two following it, these 5, 4, 3 all get their credit in society. I think 2 and 1 are severely underrated. Rosemary's Baby is one of the great films of the genre, though. Basically, I guess I shouldn't have to tell you the plot of Rosemary's Baby, but I will just for the sake of it. Mia Farrow gets pregnant, and she, thinks she was maybe drugged the night before. She doesn't remember having sex with John Cassavetes, and she slowly but surely realizes that her neighbors may just be part of this kind of witch cult / devil worshipping cult. She feels that maybe her husband may be against her doctor may be against her, and this is the genius of the film, Because a lot of people hear Rosemary's Baby and they think, oh, you know, she gives birth to the devil, whatever. She gives birth to Satan, blah, 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 blah. Yes, that is the finale. I understand that. But where this movie shines, why this movie's a classic, is Mia Farrow's paranoia and feeling that no one is on her side throughout beginning, middle to end. We're introduced to her and John Cassavetes, and John Cassavetes is just the picture perfect husband. I mean, he's so nice to her, playful with her, cheerful. You know, they have dinners together, they have nights out together. They're like the picture perfect couple. So right off the bat, we like him. Then you're introduced to Ruth Gordon, who plays one of the neighbors. She's just kind of this nosy old lady. We like her too. I think what Polanski does is he kind of opens the door for us to trust all of these people. And then we all question whether or not we do through Mia Farrow's paranoia. And what's so genius about this film, why this film works, is that we don't know until the very ending whether Mia Farrow is going crazy or these people may just be a cult. And it really leaves it up to you for quite a big portion of this movie. Like, there's a point where you can go, wow, man, Ruth Gordon, this is a nosy bitch. But maybe she is just a nosy bitch. Like, I've met plenty of nosy bitches in my life. Is it possible that they're just nosy, annoying people? Sure. Is it possible that John Cassavetes is a good, caring, loving husband that cares for what's best with his family? Sure. He certainly doesn't give you many vibes to think otherwise. And I just adore this film for that theme, for that tackling of paranoia, because it's not easy to do. It's not easy to execute. And I've always loved Quentin Tarantino. He puts this movie over like crazy. He says that's the beauty of the film too. It is the paranoia. It is the fact that until the line, "What have you done with its eyes?" she could just be going apeshit crazy. And that's the fun dynamic you play with the viewer. Of course, nowadays I feel like so many people know the ending that there really is no suspense for some people, which is fine. I mean, that's totally cool if that's how they feel. But I don't know, man. I think it's so well done. And I think where Polanski in the previous film that he did, Repulsion, well, he actually made the vampire comedy in between these, but the previous real horror film, Repulsion, he had more style over the substance, whereas in this film, he kind of meshed the two together to perfection. Like, I think this movie has a great style to it. The dream sequences, or maybe not dream sequences, we don't know, where you see the devil get on top of Mia Farrow and stuff like that. Really freaking creepy. Of course, you have the book that, and it's an anagram. Like, one of the title of the book is her neighbor's name in an anagram, and she's like, he's part of the cult, and he's just, and then John Cassavetes like, bitch, you're losing your mind. Like, I love that stuff, and the fact that her doctor's in on it, her husband's in on it, her neighbors are in on it. All the supporting roles around her do such a good job at blurring the lines between, do I trust this person, do I not? And that's why I love Rosemary's Baby. I think in a lot of ways, people just see that ending and go, holy shit. And it is a crazy ass ending. I love that ending where Satan is his father, not Guy. Hail Satan! You know, the two like old birds in the back. Hail Satan! And the little Japanese guy with the like taking pictures of the whole thing. That's a fun ass finale. Like, it only goes on for about 7-8 minutes, that scene. But everybody remembers that because it's just so, what have you done to him, you maniacs? I love that shit, man. The finale is fucking great. And I think all the lead up, all the build up to get there is why I love horror movies. It's really, really well done, man. The horrors of paranoia tackled by Roman Polanski, a film that was a mega hit in its day. And I think, again, a movie that I will say, if I have any gripe with this film, I don't really know if Mia Farrow's the greatest lead. I think she does good selling facial expressions, but I definitely think like line delivery, you could have got someone better. That's just me though. Of course, the music is fantastic. The la 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 in the beginning where they show that pink text. Pink text was a big thing in the '60s, which I love. I wish they'd bring that back. I love me some pink text before my horror films. I always really enjoy that. But yeah, man, Rosemary's Baby is a fucking classic. I'm gonna go 10 out of 10. I totally agree with Aiden here. 10 out of 10, man. I completely agree with you. Oh, that's cool. I love Inferno and Mother of Tears. Mother of Tears is fucking great. I love Mother of Tears. Um, yeah, so that is Rosemary's Baby coming in as the number 5 slot. Gotta love me some Polanski, man. One of the best horror filmmakers of the 1960s for sure. Coming in at number 4, a film that I pretty much would feel would be on everybody's top 10 list, a film that has gotten its praise. And I will go into it because I actually don't know if I've ever talked about this movie on the channel, which is pretty amazing. Coming in at number 4, it's Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960, starring, of course, Vera Miles, of course, Tony Perkins, who gives the performance of his career. And this is probably the most famous, most talked about, most beloved horror film of the 1960s. It's either this one or the one I have at number 3. But yeah, Psycho, what I mean, this is one that I know I haven't talked about it much, but really, what is there left to say? Kind of thing. I think it's actually more interesting to talk about the Psycho sequels, like Psycho 2, Psycho 3. Less and less people talk about those movies. Hell, even Psycho 4 would be a fun conversation. But Psycho is a fucking masterpiece as well. And, you know, it's 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 really the film that I think it's not a slasher film at its core. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, this is the first slasher," and then people will say, "Oh no, Peeping Tom is the first slasher." Granted, Peeping Tom is an honorable mention, so I will mention that. Um, I don't see this as a slasher film. I see this as a movie that was probably intended to be a thriller that kind of turned into a horror film through the production, like while it was going on. I'm not sure if Hitchcock really intends this to be full-fledged horror like The Birds. I think this is more of a thriller approach, but the execution, in similar vein to a movie like Silence of the Lambs, it's tackled like thriller. The finished product is horror, and that's why I really, really enjoy Psycho. Of course, Tony Perkins playing Norman Bates. He is just absolutely phenomenal in this film. I love the scene with he and Vera Miles when they're having dinner together. And, do you have any friends? And well, the boy's best friend is his mother. I love that. And she talks to me bad sometimes, but we all go a little mad sometimes. I love just that the entire conversation of Vera Miles just kind of weird, peculiar looking at him. She's just like, man, this guy's fucking nuts. Like, which I really adore. I think she does a really good acting job in this, man. She's sensational. Um, I think that, of course, the music works. The shower scene is just so goddamn iconic, and that music, of course, of course, the Martin Balsam scene where Martin Balsam's trying to figure out what's going on. I love how that's all built up to how he kind of knows that something's up, but not quite what. And, Mama Bates slash Norman Bates pops out of the door and stabs him. And that scene where he falls down the steps. I mean, that's some iconic imagery. That's iconic stuff. It's really, really, really well done, man. And that's one of my biggest reasons why I love Psycho. I think it's really awesome. But I think what sets this film apart and what makes this an iconic horror film is the reveal at the end, where the entire time we're thinking that Mama Bates is doing the killings, where we reverse to Norman Bates has gone crazy and he dresses up in drag to murder these people one by one. That's an awesome twist. And it was so ahead of its time that at the end they have this psychologist kind of explain the finale to you. They have this psychologist kind of just go, "Oh, well, the boy thinks he's the mother." And they're just like, "What?" Like everybody in the room is going, "What?" And I couldn't imagine the people in the theaters in the 60s going, "What the hell?" Funny story about this one. My grandmother was 8 months pregnant and saw Psycho in the theater. I think that's fucking awesome. Like, could you imagine me and seeing that shower scene? Like, that was the first time anything like that had really been shown on film. Even though you really don't see any penetration, you do feel it though. And that's what some of the best horror filmmakers do. And Hitchcock is no exception. You feel those puncture wounds, the sounds, the screams, the way the blood goes down the drain. That's horror imagery at its finest, and it's one of the most famous horror scenes for good reason. We all remember that. And of course, I think one of the best shots in horror history is the end where Anthony Perkins is sitting in the room and the fly goes on his hand and he looks up and gives that demonic smile. towards the camera as Mama Bates cuts the promo. They'll see and they'll know and they'll say, why, he wouldn't even harm a fly. There's that smile, and the film ends. Just classic. Classic. It's cinema history, Psycho. I mean, there's really not much more I can add that hasn't been said, but that's why I love the film. I love the switch. I love the music, the direction, the build, the shocking, oh my God, Vera Miles got killed. Who's our lead character now? Boom, you jump to her sister character. And, what I thought, again, another thing that nobody ever mentions with this movie, which this is something I can add. Everyone always, says, oh, Norman Bates had no motive. And that's what makes him scary. I agree. I love that she steals the money and they kind of think subvertly that he is doing this because of the money at partial times in the film. They're like, oh man, she went missing, the money's missing, that's weird. And I'm just sitting there like, they almost think that whoever's doing this is after the money, where he took the car with the money in it and buried it in a thing of mud. I love that. Money is not a factor here. It is all about Mama Bates getting her fucking kills in. That is why this movie works, man. There's no money, there's no scheme. It's just a young up and coming actor in Anthony Perkins coming into his own, being a phenomenal psychopath. And I mean, I just think it's one of the best movies ever made. So that is Psycho, coming in at number 4. Yeah, Aiden gives it a 10 out of 10 as well. I feel like, yeah, you have to. It's an iconic film. So people are going, Psycho at number 4? What? You have 3 movies from the 1960s above this? I got to hear this, man. Be honest, I like these 3 movies more. And the top 2 don't get anywhere near the love that they should get, in my opinion. But this number 3 film does. It is one of my favorite horror films of all time. It is a film that is solely responsible for creating a genre in its own right. It is from 1968. It is George A. Romero's feature debut, Night of the Living Dead. One of the best horror films ever. Again, a horror film that went on to create an entire subgenre of horror. The zombie film, as we know and love it today, does not exist without this movie. So this movie is so super fucking important. Like, people say, oh, slashers wouldn't exist without Psycho. And in a lot of ways I understand, but I do think at the same time, a movie like Blood and Black Lace, a giallo like Blood and Black Lace, inspires slashers more. That's more of a slasher movie than Psycho. People are getting murdered one by one until you learn who the killer is at the end. That's more of a slasher formula than Psycho. Like Psycho, okay, you do have a couple killings in there, but that's more of the psychology of a psychopath and the mother aspect and the music. And there's so many other reasons why Psycho works. I think it's so much more than a slasher film while it has those elements. But with Night of the Living Dead, it's the zombie film. Because before this, all you really had was the I walked with a zombie and the voodoo zombie elements, which I've never been a big fan of those films. Like, I'll be honest, I like The Serpent and the Rainbow, the Wes Craven return to that style of zombie film. I like that. But I don't know, man. I Walked with a Zombie, I mean, I think it's okay for what it is. White Zombie, I don't know. I'm just kind of never been the biggest fans of those movies. I don't hate them, but I do think in a lot of ways they can be a little bit tedious to get through. Not much happens in those movies, and I'm definitely more of the Romero flesh-eating zombie guy myself. I like that style of zombie better. And that's what he was able to create in this film. Of course, it tells the story. I'm just going to change camera angles here. I don't know why. I feel like I'm losing picture here. But it basically stars Judith O'Dea as Barbara and her brother Johnny, and that opening classic scene in the cemetery. They're coming to get you, Barbara, which is, of course, in itself iconic. And she basically gets attacked by this zombie. Johnny gets knocked out. She runs over to the farmhouse where she meets up with Dwayne Jones as Ben, who is one of my favorite characters in any Romero film. May he rest in peace. He gives an excellent performance in this film. And then we're introduced to all these people in the cellar. Of course, the Cooper character, who's an asshole, a young couple. One of the woman is Judith I think Judith Riley. Yeah, Judith Riley, who does an awesome job. I wish she had acted more. She definitely, I think she may have been a model because she was gorgeous. Um, this is horror at its finest again because not only was Romero able to create a subgenre of horror, but he was able to say and discuss the horrors that we have within ourselves and the horrors of the lack of communication between one another. You have two sides in this film. You have the Dwayne Jones side and the Cooper side. Cooper wants to stay in the cellar. Dwayne Jones wants to stay out up there, board up the windows, and take their chances till the cavalry arrives. And it's through their arguments, it's through them butting heads, it's through them saying, let's not work together and come up with a game plan that ultimately leads to their downfall. That is the beauty of any and every Romero zombie film. The zombies are pawns in the chess game. And it's not that they win, it's that we lose. It's our failure to communicate as a whole that leads to them killing us. If we cannot work together in here, we will be consumed, conquered, and victimized by the zombies out there. That's why I love George Romero, and that's why George Romero is a fucking genius. The A in George A. Romero stands for a fucking genius. That's a classic. I mean, it's the truth because really, I mean, can you think of any other filmmaker that truly created their own style of subgenre with one film? I mean, I can't. I mean, Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley. That was a novel. She didn't really create a movie with, reanimating corpses. I mean, people like H.P. Lovecraft years and years before her were talking about reanimating corpses. And of course, you have Reanimator in the 1980s. Um, George Romero just he struck lightning. I mean, it's lightning in a bottle, and a lot of the political subtext of this film that a lot of people love. It's in my opinion, and I'm actually pretty sure this is not even an opinion. This is a fact. All of the political subtext is inadvertent. The whole thing at the end where Dwayne Jones gets shot, everyone thinks, oh, possibly was he shot because he was black? And I know a lot of people have argued that. Romero himself said no, that like we shot that scene, we put the stuff in the back of the car, the film reels, we heard on the radio that Martin Luther King had just been assassinated after we shot that scene. So only you could only fall into something like that. You really can't do something like that on purpose because in my opinion, that's what makes it work. That's what makes it controversial is that he didn't mean to do it. And that's why I think a lot of filmmakers today need to realize be subtle with it. Romero was not even intending to do it, yet it comes off so subtle and so humble, and that's why that point of the movie really works. And another one for the fire, and this movie creates all the tropes. You got to shoot them in the head, and they'll stay away from fire, and all that stuff. And if you get bit, you turn. Of course, I love the Karen Cooper slowly turning into a zombie in the basement. One of those things bit her on the arm, and she comes to life and stabs her mother to death. That is one of the most horrifying scenes in horror movie history. I would say it's a top 10 scariest scene in horror history for me. Just because of the mother doesn't want to accept it. She goes, "Oh, baby, please don't do." And fucking Karen Cooper goes to town and stabs the shit out of her mother, and then in turn kills her father. And the design for that child, I mean, it's on a lot of the posters, it's on a lot of the cover arts. It is truly iconic horror cinema. Um, I think Night of the Living Dead is a perfect film. I don't. I know there are a lot of people now that don't get into it. They get way more into Dawn and Day. And I'll be honest, I like Day better. I like Dawn better. I do. But I don't think there's any shortchanging what Night of the Living Dead did because without Night of the Living Dead, you wouldn't have those two films. Without Night of the Living Dead, you wouldn't have Shaun of the Dead. You wouldn't have all these remakes. You wouldn't have Dead Snow, Train to Busan, whatever you want to say. Like any zombie film after it owes the greatest bit of gratitude to George Romero and Night of the Living Dead. Of course, The Walking Dead. We wouldn't have The Walking Dead without anything George Romero ever did. Did they ever bring him in to direct an episode? No. I don't know. I think that's lousy, man. I think the guy made something iconic with no money. I mean, bunch of people in a farmhouse. It's one of the most ripped off horror movies of all time. How many horror movies have you seen with people in a farmhouse hiding from something? You know what I mean? Like it's been done to death. But Romero really did it first, and I think Romero did it best, man. Night of the Living Dead, a 10 out of 10 for me. I absolutely adore this film. Eden says, I mean, another 10 out of 10. He's in my top 3 favorite directors. Mine too, man. I love George Romero. Night of the Living Dead is the only George Romero zombie film where everyone dies. Yep, isn't that crazy? But I think he had to prove a point, and I think that was more of the tone that the '60s as a decade has, as opposed to the '70s. Where the '70s, you can end your film with Dawn of the Dead with Ken Foree fighting zombies with A-Team music playing in the background. And how much fuel do we have left? Not much. All right, and they fly off into the sunset. I really enjoy that. I love that finale as they kind of fly away. But with this movie, I think it made more sense to end it on a depressing note, because a lot of these movies do end on depressing notes. I won't lie. The Innocents ends on a depressing. What? How many of these end on a depressing note? The Innocents, Repulsion, Blood and Black Lace, Rosemary's Baby. Psycho ends on a good note. But yeah, most of these movies end on a down note. So if you're not a fan of downbeat endings, a lot of these movies have it. And Night of the Living Dead obviously is no exception. So that is Night of the Living Dead from 1968 in the number 3 slot. I absolutely love it. I recently watched Diary of the Dead. Oh man, I love Diary of the Dead. That's my favorite of the final 3 he did. I know people fucking hate it and think I'm crazy, but I don't know. I like Diary of the Dead the best. I thought it had the most to say. Granted, it's not subtle. It's definitely not subtle, but I don't know. There's something about it I liked. I liked the throwback, because I feel like Land of the Dead tried to reinvent the wheel and failed, and I hate the cast. Whereas with Diary of the Dead, he went back to his roots. Cheap, you know, actors we didn't know. Um, I love that film. I really liked that movie, and I liked the whole message. I liked it. I reviewed that. I did a Romero episode if you're interested, talking about the Dead films. I really do enjoy that one. So on to number 2. We are in the top 2 horror films of the 1960s. I'm sure a lot of people probably thought, oh, this guy, what is he going to say? He's going to say Psycho, Night of the Living Dead. There's number 1 and 2. Nope, number 3 and 4. Coming in at number 2, it is from director Herc Harvey. It is Carnival of Souls. I love this film. I think, and weirdly enough, the top 2 spots both have films from 1962. So I guess 1962 was the golden year of the '60s for me. Um, I absolutely love Carnival of Souls, and basically tells it's horror at its simplest, but it's horror also at its finest. And it's a movie that I wish to Jeebus people would give a chance, and people would like more, and people would watch more, because I just adore this film. It basically, the movie opens with a drag race. There's no whatever studio presents, there's no this film, whatever. It's just bam, you start and there's 3 women drag racing next to 3 men. They're drag racing. They get to the point where they're on this bridge and the women veer off the bridge into the water, and we think they've all died. And then we get the Carnival of Souls title in the water as the car makes the splash. Excellent, excellent opening to your film. We have one survivor. She kind of swims out and crawls to land, and it's an iconic shot of her getting onto the mud, and all these people are like, oh, you made it. Oh my gosh. Then we follow her like a month or so later. She's an organist in this church, and she's trying to move on from this past incident that happened, and she moves into this new apartment. And slowly but surely, this ghoulish figure, played by none other than the director himself, Herc Harvey, is kind of stalking her throughout her everyday life. She can't go to the bathroom without seeing him. She can't go make a cup of coffee without seeing him. And throughout her window from her apartment, she sees this abandoned carnival each and every day. And for some reason, she feels deep down inside, it's never said, and that's why it works. She feels a connection to it. She feels a draw to it. She wants to go to the carnival. And this movie is tension and simplicity done to perfection, done at its finest. I love Herc Harvey's direction in this, and I love that he kind of plays the main antagonist slash ghoul. That's really cool. I think the lead actress is gorgeous. I forget her damn name. I could look it up though. She is a really, really good looking woman. I always forget her damn name. Carnival Souls. I'll get it 1 second. Candice Hilligoss. I don't know if she really went on to do too much more. I can look. I mean, Yeah, I don't know. She didn't really do too much. But I think she does a great job in this. She's really good to look at, and her facial expressions really sell the film. And I think she does a really, really good job. She's a good scream queen. She's got a good scream to her. I love it, man. She just does an excellent job. And I love my favorite scenes in this movie, again, are simple. Like, she's walking through this abandoned carnival at one point, and there's something about a place like a carnival that is so lively and so innocent and so for children that when it's abandoned, it's so eerie, it's so creepy. You know, you can't walk past the rides without like thinking of children, you know, cheering and screaming, going up and down a roller coaster. Or the scene where she walks past, we all remember the slides where you get on a like a mat and you'd slide down a couple like the, I don't know, potato sack slide, I guess. There's a scene where she walks by the slide, she looks, and one of the potato sacks comes down without anybody being on it. Simple, simple, but so flippin' effective. That's why I love horror, man. That's just excellent stuff. I love it. It's eerie. It's well executed. I love the scene where she's visiting the psychiatrist and this guy is slowly but surely kind of, oh, it's all in your head. You're not really seeing this guy. And towards the end of the film, she's like, listen, I'm seeing him. I don't care if you say I don't. I'm seeing him. You need to fucking help me. And the guy turns around the chair, and it's Herc Harvey sitting in the chair doing like this with his hands, fucking with her. And then she runs off to the carnival where you have this crazy ass climax where for a minute the carnival is back to being popular again, and there are people dancing. You know, they all have these ghoulish kind of faces and these dark black eyes and white face paint. Again, you would think that sounds cheesy, but it's so damn creepy because the black and white tone and the simplicity of it. He did not have much money. What he had was creativity. And that's why I love this movie even more so than a movie like Psycho, whereas Psycho had all these, you know, famous actors and the big budgets and all this stuff where Herc Harvey said, I don't have any of that. You know what I have? I have creativity, and I'm going to accentuate the positives and I'm going to hide the negatives. I don't have, you know, the most film stock. I'm going to make a short and sweet film. I don't have, you know, all these people that could be extras. I'm going to shoot an abandoned carnival. I'm going to use what I can use to make my film effective and that much more scary. And I think he nails it. I love this film. I think Carnival of Souls is one of the most underrated horror movies of all time. It is another one that is public domain, so you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it anywhere. It's public domain for free. If you have Amazon Prime Video, I realized last night, and I never knew this before, they uploaded a version of it in color. So if you don't like black and white movies, now you can watch it even in color. But I will say that the black and white atmosphere, it just adds so much more to the layer of the film. I think the film would be still effective in color. I just think this is one that the black and white really helps it. I don't know. It's just me. Maybe it's just me, but I just adore this film. I think it's really, really well done. Herc Harvey, buddy, you made a horror classic. Carnival Souls, I'll forever love it. It is my number 2 favorite horror movie of the entire decade of the 1960s. 10 out of 10. Um, Carnival Souls. Oh, I didn't never knew Romero had, loved Carnival Souls. That is really cool to hear because I think in turn a movie like Night of the Living Dead may be borrowed from the simplicity of Carnival of Souls, and it is just as creepy as Carnival of Souls. So that's really cool to hear, and I totally believe that. Carnival of Souls sounds awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend, man. It is horror at its finest. It's so simplistic, but man, does it pack a punch. All right, so into the honorable mentions. This is the point of the show where I'll probably piss people off, and people go, "How did these not make your list?" It's my list. That's why. It's just personal preference. So if you don't agree, that is fine. If you want to make your own list, that's cool too. But getting into the honorable mentions, of course, we have Peeping Tom. Really like Peeping Tom. We have Black Sabbath, which is another Baba film, which probably would have made the top 10, but I felt it was just so like at 3 Baba films in your top 10. I mean, you got to give somebody else a chance. That's why The Innocents gets the number 10 spot. But in reality, I love Black Sabbath just as much, if not more, than The Innocents. So I do love Black Sabbath. I love me some Black Sabbath. That's a horror anthology from the 60s. Really, really well done. Boris Karloff is the host. He's actually in one of the segments. It's sensational. The Birds, of course, Hitchcock's The Birds. Dementia 13, which is Francis Ford Coppola's film. Eyes Without a Face, which is another really, really good one. That's really kind of a precursor to exploitation style of films. Films like The Human Centipede would go on to be. It's a movie about this doctor and his daughter gets into this horrible accident and dies, and then he basically tries to rearrange her face, and she has this creepy mask on, and it has all the exploitation tropes, evil mad scientist doing some crazy batshit surgeries, and by the end of it he gets murdered by German shepherd dogs, and it's a fucking crazy film. It's pretty much an exploitation film made in the 60s. But I absolutely love that one. So those are most of my honorable mentions. If you think of ones that I haven't mentioned, you totally can. But that takes us to the number one slot on the show. A movie, again, just like Carnival of Souls, gets no goddamn credit for being one of the best horror films of the 60s. And in my opinion, it is the single best horror film of the 1960s. And without further ado, it is Robert Aldrich's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane from 1962, starring the legendary Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. I know. A lot of people probably like, what? Hear me out. I love this. This is everything I look for in a horror film is in this film. It basically tells the story of baby Jane Hudson, who was a big child star, and slowly but surely she's doing her performances on stage, and she's singing this creepy song. They have dolls made of her. She is like the child, like a Shirley Temple star. And we're introduced to her sister Blanche, who isn't happy about her sister having the limelight, but she respects it and she treats her with respect and whatnot. You fast forward about 25 years down the road, and now the roles have sort of reversed. Now Blanche is a big film star, and baby Jane Hudson is kind of looked at as, oh, the former child star, the has been of the two, if you will. One fateful night, we see a car smash into the fence of this mansion, and the next thing we know, Joan Crawford, who plays the Blanche character, she's in a wheelchair, crippled, and Bette Davis is her caretaker, and this is years and years later. So we don't know what quite happened there, although we do find out. This movie is genius for a bunch of reasons. Number one, Bette Davis. Bette Davis and for, Joan Crawford for that reason, for that matter too. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford were two of the most iconic and popular actresses in the 30s and 40s. And a lot of people towards this time were like having a hard time finding roles for them. We don't know. We want you in our film. And what Robert Aldrich did was, I'm going to get the last bit of greatness that these two have out of them. And what a lot of people don't, really realize is, I don't think, and I had never realized, they never worked together on a film, I believe, until this point. And the weird thing enough, Bette Davis and Joan Crawford hated each other. They actually have a show called The Feud with Jessica Lange and Susan Sarandon starring as the two characters, the two actresses. And they hated each other for real. Like, they had a real life feud. They absolutely despised one another, which I think adds so much more tension to the film, because a lot of the film is them hating on each other. Bette Davis is so jealous that Blanche went on to be this big film star, but then at the end of the day, Blanche is crippled and in bed and miserable, and Bette Davis tortures this bitch. She feeds her fried rats and fried birds and psychologically just torments her. A lot of this is just back and forth dialogue between the two that it gets really hateful. But it's so well effective, like so well done, man. It's very effective at that. I think Robert Aldrich is the director. He does such a great job at painting two sides of the story. You feel very sympathetic for Joan Crawford, but at the same time, Bette Davis is just so damn entertaining in her role that you can't look away at the horrors that she's dishing out. And slowly but surely, Bette Davis is kind of resorting back to her child self. She wants to be a star again. She wants to sing in front of people again. And at one point, she hires Victor Buono, who was nominated for an Oscar for this film, as this kind of pianist player. And he's playing the piano for her, and she's singing and stuff like that. I don't know why, man. It's just so damn creepy. It's so damn effective. Just facial expressions throughout this entire film. So well done. So well done. Like everybody, you're just like, oh my God, like you feel the dread from the minute one to the end. It's very, very well done. I love it. Of course, you have the Elvira character who's the maid, and she's going in to check on Joan Crawford every now and again. And one day, Betty Davis says, I don't need your service here anymore. Go home. And Elvira kind of slides back into the house and is checking on Joan Crawford, who is chained up and starved and malnourished. And Betty Davis comes from behind her and whacks her over the head with a fucking hammer and beats her skull with a hammer. Some crazy ass shit for 1962. Something you don't see coming. You're like, oh my God, like not Elvira. Leave this poor lady alone. But I think where Robert Aldrich nails this movie and why I think this movie is great is the horrors of jealousy that it tackles. Here, on one hand, you had an up and coming star that at one point or another was told, you can't do it anymore. You can't play anymore. And that killed her. It killed her soul. And what killed her even worse was seeing her sister, who was nothing, not a star, not a, nothing growing up, become this big Hollywood successful actress. It ate Betty Davis's character alive. She hated seeing her sister flourish while she plummeted. And surely enough, when Blanche, Joan Crawford's character, gets crippled, she's just so helpless that you do feel bad for her. But on the flip side of the coin, in a lot of ways, you kind of feel, well, maybe Joan Crawford was jealous of Betty Davis as a child, and slowly but surely, you kind of realize that too. I just think jealousy and that theme has really not been tackled too much in the genre, and I think Robert Aldrich just nailed it. I think it's so damn effective. And the scenes of Betty Davis singing in the mirror and putting the old school makeup on, it is so damn terrifying. I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above. Fucking creepy as she's looking in the mirror and dancing and with this white, face paint. And the Victor Buono character is just kind of looking at her. He's just like, oh my God, like this bitch is nuts. Like this bitch has lost her damn mind. Um, it's really it's just so freaking scary. And, there are some great dialogue scenes between the two, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. And Betty Davis just can't get over the fact that she isn't a star anymore. And she says at one point to Joan Crawford, she says, do you remember when we were kids and we used to play on the beach and, Daddy would have me, play music for me and I'd dance and the circles and crowds would pile around me as I dance on the beach. And I want that again, Blanche. I lust for that again. You feel for her, your heart, even though she's diabolical, even though you don't root for her, you do feel for her because she was somebody who just lost it all. It would be the proverbial, Mary Kate and Ashley being child stars, and then now Elizabeth Olsen is the star of that family. Like it's just kind of that dynamic, and I really like that. I think this is something cool to go after in a film. And of course, I just always adored the finale on the beach where Joan Crawford has been beaten. I mean, Betty Davis beats the shit out of Joan Crawford in this film, feeds her rats, and if she doesn't eat her rats, she doesn't get lunch. And her lips are chapped, her eyes are sunken. She looks like a skeleton. They're both lying on the beach, and Betty Davis has fully resorted back to a child. I mean, she's playing with these other children, and everybody's kind of looking at this. She's like, "What is this old bitch doing?" Like, it is kind of scary, and you get this utter reveal that blows your mind, and it makes you really think about everything else in the film that preceded it, and it makes you rethink that stuff. You hear that Blanche, who had blamed Betty Davis for being a cripple, was actually the driver of the car. She was trying to run over Betty Davis. When we the entire time think it's the other way around, that Betty Davis tried to run her down over the jealousy. No, it was Joan Crawford who was trying to kill Betty Davis over the jealousy factor. That's a very cool dynamic where your protagonist almost loses all of her credibility and sympathy within that one sentence. And I just remember the first time I watched this, I went, "No way! You're an awful person too. You're even worse than her." And Betty Davis is so far gone that she barely processes what she's been told. And she looks at her and says, "You know, it is a damn shame. We could have been friends this whole time." And she says it like a child, like, "This whole time we could have been friends." I love it, man. And she's like, "I'll go get us some ice cream. Like, sit here, sit tight." And she goes to get the ice cream. She's fully fucking lost it. And as she's walking back, these two police officers confront her and they're like, "Where's your sister? Like, we need to know." And all these people start to watch Betty Davis as she looks around, and it's her prophecy coming true. It's her dream coming true. It's in that moment that she's fully reverted back to a child and she starts to perform and dance in front of the crowd like she used to do on the beaches for her father. It's so damn creepy as she dances and dances, and the film kind of pans up and we see the end. And I just every time I watch this film, I see two actresses that nobody else gave a damn about anymore. I see two actresses that knew they had to bring the best that they ever had and knew they had to bring the best they ever could to a genre that always needs something like that. Horror always needs a great performance or two. This movie has, I think, has three. I think Victor Buono does a great job in this movie too. But to have those three come into their own and just nail this movie, I think it really elevates this to a different level. And this movie was a gigantic hit when it came out. I believe it grossed the equivalent of like $72.5 million of like a film would today. That's crazy. But it has everything. It has the suspense, it has the great direction, it has the great acting, it has the great story, great cinematography, creepy atmosphere, creepy music. Again, two actresses that brought it, and really their real life feud kind of is let go onto the screen and we can feel their hatred towards one another, and that adds so much more genuineness and validity to the film. I think it's one of the best horror movies of all time. I think Robert Aldrich nailed it. Apparently he was such a big fan of this film, his own film, he played the "Written a Letter to Daddy" song at his funeral. He requested that to be played because he felt that this was his greatest film achievement and, you know, join, effort into the cinematic world. He felt this was his greatest effort and contribution to the cinematic world. So that is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Again, a 10 out of 10. If I could break the scale, I'd give it an 11. It's my favorite of the 1960s. Just has everything. It has everything and anything and everything you'd love to love in a horror film. Uh, it's just fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I will say this until I die. Betty Davis should have won an Oscar for this. And this is true bias that the Academy is not into horror films. She was nominated, but she did not win, which is bullshit because she did it all. She made me feel sympathetic. She made me feel disgusted. She made me feel terrified. She checks off all the boxes in her wonderful performance as Baby Jane Hudson, the former has-been child star. I think it's just film at its best. So that is the 1960s in horror, and giving a kind of a decade overview. Again, uh, this is a decade that I think was very influential. And I think this is a decade where a lot of these filmmakers came into their own. A Polanski, a Bava, a Romero. These guys came into their own, man. They really, truly did. And I think they paved the way for Argentos to come, for Carpenters to come, for Cravens to come. I think they really open up the door. Like a guy like Jack Hill, bam, Spider Baby opens up the exploitation door. A movie like this, Baby Jane, bam, A-list actors, former A-list actors, whatever, can be in horror pictures. And if they give the great performances that they need to give, they can elevate a B horror picture to a great horror movie. That's sometimes what it takes. And that's why I love the 60s. It sometimes takes complex themes like rape and repulsion and disgust of men, like in Repulsion, and tackles it with the utmost simplicity. We don't need dialogue. We need a beautiful French woman going mad in an apartment, killing some people, seeing some crazy shit, and we don't know what's going on. Trippy vibes. I love that. I love all these movies on this top 10 list. Hell, I even love some of the honorable mentions. I think when they're good in the 1960s, they are truly great. So that is the 1960s in horror, 60 years of the 1960s in horror. It was a fun show. Counting down my top 10. I want to thank everybody that joined. Honestly, Aiden and maybe for 2 minutes, Ridley was here. Thank you, Aiden. I really appreciate you sticking through the whole time. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, the 70s, I guess, or I'm sorry, the 60s, I guess, just isn't that interesting of an era for some people. But I don't know. For me, it was very interesting. And I did a lot of fucking preparation for this show. So even though, not everybody watched, Aiden, I really do appreciate it. My hat's off. My hat's off. I have a bad haircut. Well, I need a haircut, I should say. But my hat's off to you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you watching, and this was a fun show. Next week, I can give the spoiler because this is already in the cards. This is already cemented. Next week, we are going to be doing Jeepers Creepers, a trilogy retrospective with my good buddy Nick Reap. Oh, no way! Mark's here! Mark, where were you for the past hour and 25 minutes? Jesus, Mark, one of my favorite fucking people. Mark, I hope all is well and you're staying safe, babe. Well, text me after this. We'll talk because I'm gonna end the show here. But yeah, man. Next week, Jeepers Creepers trilogy. We're talking the classic numero uno, the very fun part two, and the shit turd that is Jeepers Creepers 3. Oh yes, we'll be talking all three of them. Me and Nick Reef gonna have a blast doing that. So thank you again, Aiden. Thank you, Ridley. Thank you, Mark, for the showing up at the end here. That was pretty cool. I thank everybody who watched. That is the 1960s in horror. I am the Pajama Pants Player, the best in the world. Too sweet, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of your day and a great weekend. Stay safe, stay beautiful, too sweet, and check out some of these films. Peace out, everybody.